Praise the Lord and hook 'em. Or something like that.
Wish I could play the violin.
So Vic Schaefer clearly unpleased, displeased, mad about the lack of fan support for Texas women's basketball. You guys had thoughts on this. I mean, he's got a good team, good program, expecting the same type of support he has gotten previously, and he's not getting it. Does he have reason to be upset? Is this his own fault? Is it his own doing? Does it sour him on the entire Texas experiment?
So, and I told you all this story this morning, but when he left state, it was a Sunday afternoon, and I saw a tweet get retweeted into my timeline from Chris De La Conte, who's their athletic director there at Texas. And, not wanting to think that I've been, chapsed. I'm looking at this tweet and I'm like, is this real? Is this really happening? And I'm looking at the replies, and I'll never forget, there were at least 3 or 4 fans in there just like, who is this person? Am I supposed to know who this is? Vic Schaefer walked away from a program he had built from the ground up and had built that fan support almost person by person. And then he went to a place where, at the end of the day, they just don't care about women's basketball. They don't. And, maybe if you win a national title, you can drag some more fans into there, but they're just not, by and large, just not going to show up in Austin, Texas on a Tuesday night and Sunday afternoon to watch women's basketball. They're just not. So, sorry, Vic. You kind of had a good thing and walked away from it. And this is how it goes.
I suppose it's possible that he forgot how it took a while to build up the support. I mean, it wasn't he walked in day one and they had 8,000 or 9,000 people at women's basketball games at Humphrey Coliseum.
Yeah.
It took a little while.
It took a lot of winning.
Right.
And right. State always loves to promote that family thing, and people who listen to the podcast know that I find it a little disingenuous. And that's being generous. But that program had the most family feeling to it because of the way the players were sort of embraced by the fan base. I mean, you would go to a press conference after the game, and you knew you were going to sit there 45 minutes while they signed all the autographs. You just go sit down, and you're like, all right, we got about 45 minutes before Vic and the players will be back here because they're signing autographs. And, he did those weekly luncheons, and he had the crowd in the palm of his hand. And you're just never going to have that at Texas. What he had here was unique. And I don't know that it can be replicated.
C-Spire text line. He did it to himself. No pity for him at all. I'm sure the money for him personally was great, but sometimes the grass isn't always greener at those larger schools. Hopefully someday these coaches will realize that. And there's this. He was pushed away. He didn't want to leave. And that is on the heels of a better discussion to have is why John Cohen let Vic get away. Cohen should have his rear fired over losing Vic. The rumor I always hear is that Cohen ran off Vic.
Wow, that's the rumor, but regardless,
there's two different definitions of ran off, right? There's ran off meaning he didn't want him to coach at State anymore, and ran off like they just didn't have the best relationship, and one chose to leave because of it.
Yeah. So
either way, it's a lesson in grass isn't always greener.
Well, that's two MSU coaches, too, like this. This is Mullen and Schaefer both waking up one morning and going, crap, I was at a place where I could have stayed forever, made a ton of money, won a lot of games, and I decided to move elsewhere. And now, look, one of them's unemployed, and the other one's griping that nobody will come out and watch his team. And, right now, Leach, not a hot candidate for other jobs. Howland, certainly not. Who knows what's going to happen with the women's job. Lamonis could get a better job if he wanted to, but what better jobs are there? There may not be one. But this might be positive for Mississippi State. It might be a situation where a few years down the road they have a young coach, and it's like, Maybe look what happened to Schaefer. Look what happened to Mullen. Maybe I got a good thing here in Starkville, and it could be a good thing in Oxford too. For I don't know, a Lane Kiffin type.
He is upset that Texas is the 37th, 36th in the country in average attendance, 2,649. If you are curious, Mississippi State about half what they claim, or Vic Schaefer claims they were averaging at 4,681. Number one in the country, South Carolina, who is the number one team in the country, averaging 12,714 a game. Iowa State just shy of 10,000. UConn just shy of 9,000. Louisville just a little over 8,000. And then it's Oregon at 7,751. So, those are your national attendance leaders in women's college basketball. On the whole John Cohen, Vic Schaefer thing, and hey, Dad, you may know more about this than I do. Mm-hmm. But this is a little bit educated and maybe a little bit connecting the dots. John Cohen was not trying to get rid of Vic Schaefer. He was not running Vic Schaefer off. Vic Schaefer was the most successful women's basketball coach in Mississippi State history. But
he was the most successful coach in Mississippi State history.
Okay.
He played for 2 national titles. Nobody else could say that.
Has he now been superseded by Chris Lemonis?
Yes, because Chris Lemonis has won a national title.
Okay. Nevertheless, wildly successful.
Yeah.
I also feel abundantly confident in saying that John Cohen was not going to get in a bidding war with Chris Del Conte at the University of Texas, or anyone else for that matter, to keep Vic Schaefer from leaving. He just wasn't. Vic Schaefer was making a king's ransom to coach women's basketball at Mississippi State. He was well into the 7 figures. He had not gotten all the way to $2 million, had he?
Ooh, I think he had when he left.
Okay, so maybe he was up to $2 million. For some reason, I was thinking it was like in the 1.4 to 1.6 range, but whatever, it doesn't matter. He was making a lot of money. And away from basketball, I know for a fact, Vic Schaefer was really happy in Starkville. He loves Old Waverly. Played a lot of golf out there in the summer. He was building a big, nice house and had some land. But he also has always had a strong affinity for the state of Texas. It's where he's from. It's where he went to school, although not at UT. He went to A&M. So there are those factors that are part of it as well. Here's the dirty truth about a really successful women's basketball program. It is great for branding. It's great for fans, for families. It's a really cool environment. It is not a revenue generator, especially when you have a coach that is making in the neighborhood of $2 million. Program was losing money. And so you got to kind of balance the whole deal when you look at it and you go, how much do we spend to try and keep a coach to sustain a product that is a non-revenue product? Now, you might argue it's part of an athletics department that has an overall $100 million budget, and you've only got 2.5, 3 sports that are making money, period. So investing into a really successful non-revenue producing sport is just the cost of doing business. You're going to make money in football. You're going to make money in men's basketball. And at Mississippi State, one of the few schools in the country where you make some money on baseball. Aside from that, every sport loses money. Most sports don't cost as much, though, as women's basketball was costing because of the success they were having. But, again, maybe you chalk that up to the cost of doing business. So, I don't know when it's all said and done. Would you prefer Vic Schaefer still as the women's basketball coach at Mississippi State? Of course you would. But he's not. And it's possible that he's less happy now. Or maybe he's just playing the game that a head coach is supposed to play, and he's trying to gin up that fan support. Even if it's you initially shame them into coming, and then they come and they have a good time, and they decide to be part of the success, and they feel like they're invested in the program on and on. And then the other question that is fascinating to me in all of this, with Gary Blair retiring at Texas A&M, is there going to be an opportunity for Vic Schaefer to make another jump? And would he make the jump from Texas to Texas A&M?
What's their average attendance?
It's not good.
What's the size of their check is probably the...
Well, we know Ross loves wasting money, so, facts about a violation. Spending money. Some could call it a waste. Some could call it spending, I suppose. But is this a lesson in the grass isn't always greener? I know, obviously, there was some internal, whatever you want to call it, at play. But with all due respect, winning doesn't necessarily equate to gigantic attendance numbers in that sport. And I would say the same thing about baseball. So it's not just a women's basketball thing. Look at the average crowd at Vanderbilt games. One of the best programs in America. They don't draw. Nobody goes. UCLA.
Well, they fill their park up now. It's just a small park.
It's a small park. But, I mean, the last regional they hosted, I saw some visible empty seats at it. UCLA. National brand. I guess they've fallen off lately, but like the year that Ole Miss went out there for a regional, didn't fill it up once. For a home regional. UCLA. National brand, but they just... No matter how good they were, it doesn't matter. People just don't care. The same can be said about women's basketball. Hell, you can say it about football programs, basketball programs, men's. Some people just don't go to games regardless of how good your team is. Look at Stanford, how consistently good they've been for a couple decades. They still don't draw. Football. But if you're mad about people not showing up to your games, Vic, shouldn't you have known that they probably weren't going to regardless of what you did? And that based on every road game you ever coached in, aside from the one at South Carolina, it's not a sport where you draw well, generally speaking. But you did at Mississippi State. You were a wild three-point shot away from winning a national championship. You were getting high-quality WNBA first-round pick level players with ease. Why go? Dan Mullen. Look, Florida's a better job than Mississippi State. Florida's a better job than Ole Miss. But he produced Mississippi State results at Florida and got canned. And, I'm not a big math guy, but yeah, he got a fat buyout. What was it, $16 million? What would you rather get? Fired after 2 years in a $16 million buyout, or have the exact same records at Mississippi State, get an extension out to 4 years with 3 automatic rollovers for $6 million a year? The state one gives you more money in the long run. No fat buyout, but it's more money. Is this another example and a lesson of coaches need to learn that the grass is not always greener in college sports? The big brand of Texas sounds amazing, but when you look at it, it's not any better. He's winning. He's getting players, but nobody there cares. They don't care. He was winning, and he had people that cared where he was, and he left.
Or maybe we're completely off base on all this.
It's possible. I usually am.
Yeah. No, I mean, I don't. Yeah,
I love the affirmed. Yeah.
No, I mean,
thanks, man.
No, I'm thinking. I'm like, maybe Vic and John Cohen did hate each other, and they just couldn't wait to. John Cohen pushed him out the door, and Vic Schaefer was throwing rocks at him on the way out the door. But I don't think that's what it was. Were they best friends? Probably not. They had respectful working relationship. John Cohen spoke glowingly about the job that Vic Schaefer was doing in the women's basketball program while Vic Schaefer was his basketball coach. But he's